Welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. Our team's goal is to present science-based information about gardening and all things nature in New York's Hudson Valley. Hosts Jean and Tim, along with team members
Teresa, Linda, and Annie,
are master gardener volunteers for New York's Columbia and Greene counties. So if you're interested in gardening or nature, or nuggets of information about what's happening outside your door, settle in. Enjoy the conversation. Whatever the season, we have something to say.
Hello, and welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. I'm Jean Thomas.
And I'm Teresa Golden.
Our conversation today is with Shelley Haefner, a fellow Master Gardener volunteer. Shelley is the proprietor of Guiding Green Thumbs, with a popular YouTube series connected. Shelley has a mini empire that includes a cut flower farm, microgreen production, daylily breeding, and many services such as garden design and coaching. Welcome back, Shelley. We had such a good time with your previous visit in episode 118 about microgreens. We asked you to come back, and here you are.
It's so good to be back. Nice to see you both.
Today we're going to be talking about kid-friendly gardening. You recently made a presentation for Cornell about gardening with kids, so let's look at that in depth. First, let's start by telling us about your two children. They're smack in the middle of a couple of the challenging age groups.
Oh, they sure are. I have a very feisty 7-year-old named Emma, and my son Blake is 12 years old and just entered middle school, so we're adapting to that change.
I'm a big fan of your YouTube channel, and the episodes about the kids' garden in Chatham are really fun. Can you tell us some more about that? I know a lot of people who are running community gardens with kid-friendly areas, and they'd love to see some of your ideas.
Sure. The kids' garden is about a quarter-acre space in Crellin Park in the town of Chatham. Last year, I partnered with the town for that space to rejuvenate it and transform it into a more educational tool for the community. So part of that agreement was teaching the kids summer camp program. And this definitely taught me some things. So last year was my first year. It was way different than teaching a single class or a presentation for Cornell. You see the same kids over multiple days and weeks. So you have to keep their engagement up and keep things exciting and fun, and also have an educational plot to sort of just make sure they're learning something also. But I have some future plans for that garden, and a lot of them came directly from working with these children over the summer camp program. And I will tell you, some of the most fun things that they had experience with were growing squash. And I know that sounds super boring, but we did the tromboncino squash. So if you know about that, you grow it up over a trellis and they hang down. They can grow over 3 feet long. So they had a lot of fun watching these things grow. They grow super fast. And then, of course, we chopped it up and grilled it with a little Parmesan cheese. So, I mean, kids were loving squash that day. Another fun discovery we did with the garden, hornworms. Not fun for me. They took down my tomato plants, but they really loved how massive these caterpillars were. It was such an engaging thing. And then, of course, they had the parasitic wasps on them. So we got to learn a whole bunch of things about hornworms and pest control organically. So who doesn't love a massive caterpillar with crazy things happening like on the sci-fi channel, right? But those are just some of the fun things. And Crellin Park really has a great space, a large space, and I really want to utilize that to its maximum potential.
That sounds like it must have been fun. Although the hornworms, I don't know. Can you elaborate a little bit about the presentation you did for Cornell Cooperative Extension on child-friendly gardening? Can groups request your presentation through the CCE Speakers Bureau?
Yeah, they sure can. So I put a lot of planning and information into this presentation for Cornell. Primarily, I broke it down into a few different groups. Planning, planting, and soil health, which basically goes over how to choose the best location for your garden, where's your water source, what's your soil like, where are you going to grow, what are you going to grow, how much do you grow. There's a lot of components to planning for a really successful garden. Also, if you're starting from seed, What's adapted seed? Why should you use it? What can you transplant versus what wants to be direct sown in our zone? So many things to think about. So I include that in the presentation. I also cover a little bit about production and pests. So some of our top pests in this area, I go over what to do, how to manage them a little bit better, how to get the most from your plants, and then a little bit about companion planting, just because you don't know where everyone's level of gardening is when we do the presentation. So you want to kind of cover the basics. But then finally, we get to go over how to engage your kids, and more importantly, your whole family. Get them all involved regardless of their stage of gardening, and they can really absorb and you can learn together. That's the fun part. They're going to pick up and retain more than you realize just by being out there, whether you're successful with some things or not. But if you make it fun, it really sticks. They remember the experience, they make those memorable moments, and it's going to spark their curiosity for more.
Okay, so do I understand this correctly? You had your Chatham experience where you learned through combat, and now you've got a nice orderly presentation and you show people how to do it. So in real life, it's going to be a combination of the two. So you go out there with orderly expectations and something shows up and you got to deal with it.
Correct. You have to find that balance. So the important thing is, I think it's important for parents, guardians to remember that you don't have to have a huge space to engage in nature or to have a garden. There are many different ways to accomplish growing something or experiencing the wonder of nature. You don't have to feel discouraged if you don't have an acre to grow on. And honestly, that's probably too much for most families to maintain anyway. You have time and schedules and life is busy. So one thing you can do with your kids, if you don't have a specific gardening place or location, you can go to local parks or conservation lands or even a relative's garden, observe, go on insect safari.
They can come to my house.
Yes, mine too. I have plenty. But they can actually observe and just go be an observationist, be sort of like a tourist in a garden and see what you can find. That way you don't have to commit to the amount of time it takes to plan the garden, to water There's a lot to gardening, but if you don't have those resources and the time, take advantage of the local parks and the local area and your relatives' gardens. Also, I created a bug bingo. So each of the squares on this bug bingo card, it has something that's local, something you're going to find here, obviously. And you can use that game with little kids and even older, like teenagers, to go around and over the course of a season, doesn't even have to be like for the day, could be over the course of the season, you kind of check off and learn about pollinators.
Ooh, a big poster at the gate.
Yeah, exactly. A big, little something that's good for the garden. Is it a pest that you're going to see? Because you're going to see a wide range of things, but it also familiarizes them with what we find locally here in our zone.
So let's divide the subject into 3 parts. They seem to be the highlights for success. First, we have the projects to do with kids. So what are the considerations for choosing a project?
Well, the things I consider the most important when choosing a project is their age, their attention span, their capabilities, and their interests. And you have to be realistic about your projects, right? I mean, if you're working with kids, their age and attention span are all at play. For the littler guys, choosing faster growing crops or projects that focus on observation and experience are going to really be key for them. If it's your first year gardening, we're not planting an acre of crops. Start small, consider vegetables or fruits that are easy to grow, and because nothing is going to kill an experience faster than jumping in way over your head. And you can ask me how I know this. I'm very good at it. A few other considerations is how much time do you have to invest in whatever project you're doing. So if you are going to go for the acre garden, be realistic about how much time you're going to have to be out there weeding, managing pests, watering if we have a drought. There's just so many things at play there. But you have to really be realistic about the time you can invest and how you're going to keep it interesting and engaging. Because if all you're doing is pest management and watering, I can tell you the kids are going to be inside while you're out there doing it.
Yeah, I was the kid that whined that I was bored or hot or tired or being an abused subject of child labor. So you have to keep it interesting. That's your challenge.
What do you consider the easy to grow crops for kids? I'm thinking peas and maybe string beans and perhaps cucumbers.
Yep, exactly. There's also like some squash. The trombonino squash really is amazing for them because it does grow so fast. The snap peas, sunflowers. So even if you don't do edibles, the sunflowers are super fast. We did that at the kids' garden camp. They all started it. They were able to like track the life cycle of a sunflower. And by the time they went home, they were going to bloom within a week at their house. So it gave them something also to share with their family. But yes, sunflowers, greens. If you have the little guys, they love to like spell or make their initials with the lettuce seeds and have them grow up and then they can pick them. I mean, it sounds really silly, but it's so fun for them.
Oh, I like doing that with the lettuce. I use them for background for my flowers. I just scatter the lettuce seed and they come up with a great chartreuse color as background. And I always like to graze when I'm weeding, and it's just me.
Exactly. It's funny because I had picked a whole bunch of lettuce from the garden and put it on plate for dinner, right? It was a side salad. My kids wouldn't touch it. But you know what? You put them out in the garden, they would pick the leaves and eat it. No washing. I mean, I don't even know if there were insects on the other side of the leaf, but they were same time. Exactly.
I like that you suggest ideas that involve the whole family. Some of my best memories are gardening with my mom. We were a big family, and working together seemed to make my contribution seem important.
Yeah, so I can remember sitting in the garden with my dad. My dad would sit on a 5-gallon pail, and he would literally tell us, I'm watching the beans grow. Okay. Didn't sound very fun at the time, but I remember these things. And why do I remember them? Because we were there when the peas were ready. We were picking them, shelling them. We were eating them right in the garden. And I remember just being out there. I don't exactly remember what I was taught, but that love of gardening and just those moments really instilled it way down deep in my soul. So I can tell you, I can relate to that. Some of the things that you can do for the whole family. So I have a bunch of things we're going to go over. For young kids, it's really about making them feel like they're playing in the garden. So you can do something as simple as taking pole beans and letting them take 2 beans, and everybody can do this in a planter or in a garden by a fence. As long as it has a trellis, you do a pole bean race. The little kids love this. They are going to be outside checking to see whose is growing faster. They're going to be watering it because they're going to realize the more they water it, the faster it's going to grow. And then who's going to reach the top first and who wins. It's just really fun, especially if you have little guys. And that grows really quickly. And you're also going to get edible food from it. So there's a lot of components there, but it's like play for them, which is super important. Let's see. Anyone here love pizza? I'm sure of it. One of my favorite themes for gardening is pizza, a pizza garden. And you're like, what? How am I growing pepperoni? This is what my son said. How am I growing pepperoni? And, he likes those toppings. But the goal is to create this little space. It could be even in a container, and everyone gets to pick their favorite toppings for pizza. So you could do garlic, you can do basil, eggplant, onions, blah, not for me. Broccoli, not for me. But peppers, there's a lot of good veggies that people throw on pizza, and so everybody gets to kind of customize a little garden circle for what they're going to grow on their pizza. And then you make it a family event. When you make homemade pizza, you go pick your toppings and you get them prepared. And that's just another fun way where everybody can kind of customize and participate in that project. Let's see, edible flowers. This is really fun. I had this experience not only at my own garden, but also at the kids' garden. You can grow pansies in the spring, snapdragons. Let me see what else. There's borage, nasturtiums, and calendula, sunflowers in the fall. They're pretty and edible. So you can decorate drinks, lemonade. You can put mint in your lemonade. You can just make a really fun, edible food with flowers that they pick from the garden. Most kids are fascinated by the fact that they can pick flowers and eat them. I had an experience at the kids' garden. We made an herb dip. So we had olive oil, and all the kids got to scavenge the herbs at the kids' garden. We went on a little tour. They got to rub the herbs and smell them. Do I like them? Do they smell good? Do I think I would want to taste one? So they kind of gathered all of these herbs and put them all in their olive oil little dish. And then I went over and I picked a bunch of these flowers, and I'm like, and I start eating the petals. And they're looking at me like I've lost my mind. Oh my gosh, so she's eating flowers. But I picked the petals, calendulas. And they're very pretty, very bright, and I put it in my oil. It sparked an interest. I didn't even have to say anything. All the kids wanted to do it. And they don't have much flavor, but it just added that sense of like, oh wow, we can do this. And every class after, the kids went and picked the calendula flowers and they would eat the petals. They don't even taste like anything, but the fascination of being able to eat them was really fun. I don't know if your family is like tea, but if your family is a tea drinker, you can theme a garden around
all the mints.
herbal teas, mints. What else do we have? Ginger. Ginger grows in this zone. It grows pretty well. So we can do some ginger leaves, chamomile, lemongrass. Oh gosh, the possibilities are endless there. But if you have, someone in your family who's a tea drinker, that's one way that you can get them into gardening. Let's plant our own herbs to dry and use for tea. There's just like endless ideas. Shall I keep going?
Yeah,
Sure. Okay, so you could also, if you have a foodie, you can have an Asian-inspired garden. So where you'll do like the long, slender eggplants, snap peas, edamames, peanuts grow here, radish, Thai basil.
And it's a whole different look.
It is. So that's really fun. And then, of course, sensory gardens. If you want something that's a little more interactive with your kids, you can plant things like lamb's ear, where they have the really soft leaves. You almost want to pet them. Or you have the Japanese Hakone Chloe grass, where it cascades and it's really... I pet my grass too. Is that weird? Like,
That's okay.
Feel it like Tammy, right? There's just the texture thing. And straw flowers, how fun are those? They actually feel papery and they make a really fun sound, and they're really not typical for a flower. Their flowers are usually delicate, but straw flowers have that really fun element to them. Strawberries, where they're edible. Basils, how many different flavored basils can you find now, right? There's tons. Cucumbers, pansies, because those are edible. So you're really just playing on the five senses. Is it pretty? Does it taste good? Does it feel strange or soft? Is it aromatic? Does it sound interesting when you touch it? There's something for everyone in a sensory garden. So everyone can kind of participate and plan out this sensory garden. And then if you're more into like the science, if you're more into nature and science, planting pollinator gardens, you can learn so much from them. The life cycles of butterflies. Plant some dill, parsley, some fennel, and even if you're trying to use it for culinary purposes, the butterflies are going to come find it.
All their magic.
And they are going to just naturally show you their life cycle. They're going to eat your little herbs down, but kids will also be able to just really, they engage with that. They almost adopt them as pets in the garden. They go out and see how big they get.
Teresa does that with hornworms.
Oh, dear. Well, you come see me at the kids' garden this year. I'll have a donation for you. But yeah, so just a lot of teenagers also, they all have phones, which I have a love-hate relationship with, but they can actually use their phone to create a photo journal of their memories in the garden or their moments in the garden, things that they were interested in, and create a folder in their phone so that you can go back and say, oh my gosh, these were moments in the garden that I was really drawn to, and their pictures. Teenagers are a little, you have to kind of
They're weird.
Yeah,
You could say that.
they're not going to tell you they're having a great time. They're just going to kind of sit there. But if you have this little part where you're like, take photos of the things that you loved or things that sparked their interest.
What about apps?
Yes.
Things like iNaturalist and...
Yeah. And plant this, I think, too. Yeah, there's a few of them that actually are amazing. So if you're not sure what you're even looking at, you have a way to identify the plants and the insects, too. Some of them are pretty great. I use that all the time.
Well, the other thing you can do with the kids, especially the older ones, is recruit them to help in the harvesting and freezing side.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember so many days or afternoons we would sit around the big kitchen table with a pile of string beans in front of us. So the combination of getting them washed and then getting them prepped and then getting them cooked to be frozen and then...
Wait, Teresa, you like doing that?
Well, it was a bonding thing for my brothers and sisters.
Oh, okay.
See, so it's the memorable.
You have to
moments
like
create.
siblings.
Yes, that may happen.
Okay.
I mean, in the case of my kids, they fight over, who's going to find the most peas off of the vines when we pull them, and you'll get that, but it's fun because that's a race, and there's still
Competition is
still
good.
counts as gardening. I'm convinced. But anyway, some other things, if your family likes to cook together, use that as your special interest to get the gardening going. There's always, of course, the common herbs like basil, rosemary, parsley, thyme, but you can spice it up. Try cumin, try horseradish, try borage, bronze fennel, lemon basil, pineapple sage. There's like a million different herbs that are like a little out of the ordinary that you can step up and
they're easy to grow.
Yeah, they are. They are. And then one last idea is to create a hybrid with your family. I pretty much think everyone can get a kick out of this. Squash is super easy to do. You basically plant a couple different varieties of squash and then learn how to hand pollinate the male and female flowers, cross pollinate, save the seeds from the squash that is grown, and then the next year you've created a new squash variety and you can plant and just see how it is. What characteristics did it take from each of the squash plants, and you have your own unique variety,
like the ones that come up in the compost heap.
Exactly.
Oh yeah,
exactly. You can do this with peppers too. Peppers will do this, and daylilies, of course. That's a subject close to my heart. I do this all the time, and I can tell you it is super fun. They're not always pretty, and you might not always get the best looking thing, but it is a fun experiment. And if you do get something fun, you have your own unique variety to share with the world.
And you can name it.
You can. That's super exciting. It's super exciting.
The third part of this master plan has to be the hardest. We already mentioned my attitude as a kid, and it was like pretty much negative. And you say you have a way to keep them occupied, even the ones like me?
Of course. I mean, I get like you. Let's be honest. Gardening is not always fun. The most important thing I can say, though, is attitude is everything. When it comes to kids, there are kids that will show up to the summer camp and they're just like, oh, they didn't want to go to garden. Their mom wanted them to go to garden, right? So they'll just kind of like putz over. You can tell their body language is kind of slumped over. My son gets like this too at the garden. But I can tell you that if you show that you're excited about something and that you're experiencing something that you are super, I can't wait to show you this, it does transfer to your audience. So if you're going to come into the garden and, come on, kids, you already know that they're kind of like not wanting to go in the garden. If your attitude also is frustrated and bored and uninterested, you're faking the fun, they definitely pick up on it. So they're just going to help you feel even more that way. So even though if it's hard to smile and some days are rough, you really have to find that spark in you and reset and move ahead. So I want to talk a little bit about how to keep those kids involved and happy. Remember, as a parent or guardian, you know your kid's strength best. You know the subjects that are going to, ignite their little sparks and their curiosity. And each kid's different. Some kids want to get dirty from head to toe, like my daughter Emma. Some kids can't stand touching anything that's going to be like fuzzy or dirty or sticky. Some kids are going to be very neat with gardening, and some kids are just going to dump their entire seed packet into a hole, right? They're going to be totally fine with it. Every kid is going to be unique. Some kids like the more science-based things. They love crafting activities. Some kids are just going to want to do total observation. So one of the things that I want to emphasize is that you really need to take a look at your individual child and play on those strengths, play on what their interests are, and tailor the activities to what they love to do. For example, if you have a child who loves to bake, have them go pick herbs, do an herb garden, edible flowers, make homemade focaccia bread, and do make art on top of it and bake it. It's something simple, but it also helps and keep their creativity going if that's their strength. So if you want to play on their talents and their interests, they're naturally going to want to come into the garden and help because it's actually going to fuel something that they want to do. So that's another way that you can really kind of re-engage if you have a kid who loves to do arts and crafts. If you plant aromatics like lavender, bee balm, mint, pansies, you can turn them into projects like making homemade perfumes or, air fresheners. You can do that with the oils, pressing flowers to make handmade cards, pick arrangements of flowers, have them paint them. You can do watercolors, acrylics. There's just a lot of ways to incorporate gardening into what their interests are. So I think it's really important to find their strengths and really think about this when you're planning things, because you have to draw them in. And one way to do that is naturally by what they love to do. You can always relate a gardening activity to one of their strengths.
So you got to outsmart them. Okay.
Oh, okay. It can happen, I can tell you. Although it can work the other way around, too.
You've been here before, Shelley, so you know about the Tim question. Our newer listeners may not know, but our co-host Tim, who's absent today, always wants to know from our guests, what in the chaotic world we live in gives you hope?
Well, life is hard, chaotic at best. A favorite quote of mine is, to plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow. I'm sure you've heard that a million times. But sometimes the thought of tomorrow for people seems really overwhelming. But I believe that, honestly, hope and gratitude grows in those moments when you connect with nature on any level. That smallest moment can bring you joy and peace, even if it's for a minute second. And it is a real way to align and refocus your mind, your body, and emotions.
Well, I think that answers our question, and Tim will be delirious because that was a very profound one. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming and spending time with us today.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks for having me back.
That concludes another episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. We would like to thank
Sandra Powers
and Devin Connolly from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties for production support. And a special thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. You can find links to any of the topics mentioned in this episode at our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org. Comments and suggestions for future topics may be directed to us at columbiagreenmgb@cornell.edu or on the CCE Master Gardener Volunteers of Columbia and Greene Counties Facebook page. For more information about Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties, visit our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org or visit us in Hudson or in Acre. Cornell Cooperative Extension provides equal programming and employment opportunities